My name's Ken Nomer. I am the city manager. Actually, it was a year ago, the meeting last night, in which the city council appointed me, and then I began working for the city on July 24th. So I'm coming up on my year anniversary, which this year has flown by. It's been quite amazing. Just dive into Fullerton and then be here. So I'm not new to Fullerton. I was actually born in Fullerton. I was born in St. Jude Hospital. Lived for the first part of my life just right across the 91 freeway off Harbor. And then my parents in 1979 moved to Orange. I still live in Orange with my 3 daughters and my wife. And so it's a nice, easy commute, much better than the commute to Huntington Beach. But when I look at being a city manager, I choose the community almost as much as they choose me, because there is an appointment process, but I'm very selective on where I want to go, and Fullerton is one of the places I wanted to land. So fortunate to have been appointed and looking forward to, what I told the council is, I want to stay here till I retire. So that's going to be, I don't know, 15, 18, 16, 17 years, I don't know, but we'll see how it goes. So city management is a great occupation. I tell a story to a lot of intern classes. For some reason, going from high school, at the very end of high school, you have a grad night celebration. Going into the gym, because that's where it was held at the time. They hold it in better places nowadays. But big old cameras saying, where are you going to college? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? And my answer at that time was, I'll probably be a city manager in a small, medium-sized city. So I've kind of followed that whole path, and so kind of rare, I think, in today's society to kind of know in high school where you want to go and then end up being there. But it's been a great experience, having experiences in small cities where in Villa Park I was everything. I was the city clerk, I was the planning director, the finance director, technically the building official. I did all the plans, the conditional use permits, the variances. Actually, with our 2 public works employees, at times had to get into the storm drains to clean out the storm drains because of OSHA requirements to have, 2 people down, 1 person up, and all that stuff. So, but it was great because when I would go to our city manager meetings and talk about an issue, I was really the only city manager that knew what was going on, because the others had department heads and staff to do that. I didn't have that. So as my first city manager gig, it was great to be thrown into just every part of operating a city. And the requirements to operate a city are the same for Villa Park as they are for Anaheim, Santa Ana, and Irvine. So we had to comply with all the same regulations. So that was just a great upbringing. But so I worked for the governor's office in California. I've worked for the county board of supervisors and a county department, the housing community development department, social services agency for a little bit, and then I started my city career with Villa Park, then went to Placentia, Huntington Beach, and now Fullerton, where I hope to end it. So, and not too soon. So, but there was a couple things. Pete had prepared me for a couple things just to give an update on a lot of stuff. So, on June 5th. The City Council approved the next fiscal year budget. We start our fiscal year July 1st. So for fiscal year 18-19, they approved the budget. All fund expenditures. So we have multiple funds in a city. General funds, which are typically the ones we have the ability to have some discretionary control. The City Council can talk about where they want it to go. Water funds, sewer funds, some other funds, those are restricted and special funds, but all funds together is about $194 million. General fund alone is about $93 million. So it's important that within the general fund, percentage-wise, 49% of our general fund, so 49% of that $93 million goes to fund the police department. Another 21% goes to fund the fire department. So 70% of our general fund budget goes for public safety. And within that, we all know, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, about some of the challenges ahead of us are the pension crisis that you hear about in the papers. And it truly is a crisis. It's a huge issue. No fault of any one person. Well, you can maybe blame Ray Davis for signing a bill back in 1999, but really it's been information and decisions that have evolved and have gotten us into this point in time where all cities have to do something. And truly within the next 2 to 3 years, you're going to see some cities start to fail because of the issue. That's my opinion, but I think that's going to happen. So continuing with some percentages, public works is about 7% of our budget. And then community development is about 6%, parks and recs is about 6%, and all the other little parts are the smaller parts that make up that last bit of 30% that is not public safety. So largest types of expenses, again, is salary and benefits. 68 million of that 93 million goes to salary and benefits. Maintenance and operations is 24 million. So again, the labor side, the employment side of a city is very important. And that's why when you go into labor negotiations, so the whole transparency in negotiations, Fullerton is one of the very few cities in Orange County to have a transparency ordinance. Basically what that means is in the labor negotiations process, it's not completely behind closed doors. There's some requirement that a city council has to report out some of the back and forth between an association and the city. In Huntington Beach, I was one of the primary negotiators. We had eight unions. Your typical police, fire, police management, fire management, city management, like miscellaneous employees, and then your miscellaneous. We also had marine safety because we had lifeguards. And then also what was kind of odd to me, we had a association for the seasonal lifeguards. So a lot of negotiations. During that time, a lot of one-year bargaining agreements. So we were in bargaining session after bargaining session every year. It was a lot because I also had a lot of other duties going on, but very good experience. Very frustrating at times. Labor law, any labor lawyers here? Any union reps here? I don't know. It's labor law in California is incredibly complex, geared towards favoring the employee versus the employer, including when you go through appeals and you go to the Public Employment Relations Board. And we had to do that. We were challenged on a couple things in Huntington Beach, and we had to go through the process. So, but it's such a major component, but you have to be careful because, again, it is the largest component. So when you make a decision, and say you make a decision on a 4-year employment agreement, you're entering into a contract that binds that city for the next 4 years. And as we know right now in the economy, we don't know where we're going to be next year. We're probably 3 years, 3 years past when the average recession would hit. So every 7 years there's typically a recession. We have not had one since we exited the Great Recession. And so there's some kind of cautious times right now that we're looking forward to. So we will be starting negotiations. We have one negotiation right now. We'll be entering more negotiations after the conclusion of the next fiscal year. So about halfway through you start. I predict that you'll see 1-year employment agreements. You won't see what the city did 4 years ago, which was just about every unit had a 4-year employment agreement. I don't think you'll see that again for right now. So, but going back to the budget, so it was approved. We're at about 615 full-time employees. That's a reduction of 17 from last year, and that's in order to be balanced for this year. It's also a large reduction because in about 2009 we had around 720 full-time employees for the city. So since 2009, this city has shed about 105 full-time employees. And that's a large amount. So the overall shape of finances, this is one of the questions Pete wanted. My view and I'm an optimist in life, so I'm going forward with being cautiously optimistic in the short term. If you're at our budget presentation, and all the materials, including the presentation, is up on our website. But we look at the next 5 years, and we gave three different scenarios about where we're gonna be. And on that kind of optimistic approach, we're okay in 5 years. We still have a 10% reserve fund. We're still balanced. But if something goes wrong, if the economy goes down, if property taxes take a dive, if sales tax takes a dive, if there's an adverse judgment against the city or something like that, that's very critical. We're kind of that frail. When you think of your own home finances, you know, a lot of folks don't think 5 years out and what's going to go on, but you know, if you get a job layoff or if you get a job demotion or something like that, that affects your income. So in the short term, I'm cautiously optimistic because we're changing some things here in the city as far as how we do the budget, making sure that line level staff and managers are really looking at the budget, understanding their programs, and looking at every line item to make sure that we're doing things efficiently and effectively. In the long term, I say I'm nervous. Now, I'm not going to say I'm pessimistic about where things are going, but I am nervous because, again, depending on sales tax revenues, and the primary revenue sources for a city, property tax, sales tax, charges for services. So when you come into development services or Parks and Rec, you pay a fee for a service. So those are our primary revenues that come in. Unlike the state, where the issue right now is the state had a huge, maybe $1.5 billion, $2 billion surplus. And it's because their largest revenue source is personal income tax. And in California, that fluctuates, or it can fluctuate wildly because of capital gains and other things, and people who work for Yahoo and Google cashing in and other things like that. So we don't have that wild fluctuation. We do have some issues going back to retail with sales tax, in that who here shops online and has something delivered by Amazon or somebody else? So when you don't shop locally, so if you don't go down to the Orange Fair Mall, or I call it that. My mom used to work at the JCPenney's down there in the suit section. So in the 1970s, if you bought a suit, my mom may have been there. So, and Hans was the tailor. So, but if you don't shop locally, then the city is not getting that sales tax, the 1% of the 8.25 cents sales tax. So because if you're clicking on Amazon or something like that, the sales tax goes into what's called the county pool. So it's divided between all the cities in the county. So instead of getting that 1 cent on the dollar, we're getting about 0.04 cents on the dollar because it's diluted with everything else. So when you look at if the Board of Equalization would change the way they distribute, because when you do a point and click, you're putting in your zip code of where it's going to be shipped. So you would think that in today's age, they could align that with the city you're in and then just give credit to the city for that sales tax, but they don't, and that's a political decision that they have to wrangle with up in Sacramento. But we lose about $400,000 to $700,000 a year because we're part of that pool for all of the shared sales tax that goes into it when you shop online. So there's great deals online, but please consider Fullerton first. So it does help us. So let's see. Challenges, I mentioned pensions. Those are a huge challenge because it's an uncontrolled cost. And people talk about unfunded actuarial liability. And you say, what really is that? Basically, it's that cost of what is gonna be, what you have to pay in the future based on what you've promised in the past. And so CalPERS, which is the California Public Employees Relations System, has gone back and forth on how they do it. So it's kind of like if your mortgage company would call you and say, hey, by the way, we know that you're paying a lot, and so what we're gonna do is we're gonna smooth out your mortgage to lower your monthly payment, and there's not gonna be a 30-year term on it or anything more. So we're just gonna, we're gonna lower it, we're gonna do that. That's what they did for all the cities about a decade ago, and during the recession. So yeah, it did help because all the cities started paying a little bit less. We were able to get through that recession. But without that end term, the 30-year fix, or if you're at 25 or something, your principal and interest just kept on going up. So that's part of the problem. The major part of the problem was that when city councils, and again, not the fault of city councils, but it was based on some kind of not timely or very good information from CalPERS at the time, because when you go to change your pension formula, and you may have heard of what's called a 3 at 50 formula. So what that represents is, say if I'm a public safety officer, so I'm a firefighter or a police officer, or in Huntington Beach, even the lifeguards. If I'm a classic employee getting a pension, my formula is 3 at 50. What that means is I take, at 50 years old, I'm eligible for retirement, and I take that 3 and I times the amount of years I've been working. So if I've been working for 30 years, 3 times 30 is 90. If I'm over 50, then I get 90% of my final year salary. That's a lot. That's a huge pension, especially today in public safety.
Well, it's indexed with inflation too.
And yeah, and that's another issue we'll get into about the COLA, but I could talk till 11 o'clock tonight. You guys don't want me to do that on this subject. But the problem is when they switched, then by mid-2001 we were in a recession and everything changed. The other thing is that was retroactive. And so if I had been, and I'm not picking on anybody, a public safety member, 25 years in the system under the old formula, I just got an increase of 3 at 50 for my entire career. I wait 5 more years and my pension has increased substantially because it goes all the way back to when I started. So the retroactivity part really was what ballooned that unfunded actuarial that we're still paying for. For an example, I was at the county at the time when the county voted to change the pension formula there. It went from a 2 at 55 to a 2.7 at 55 or something like that. One of my employees was going to retire, because most county employees retire in March. Instead, he said, I'm going to take advantage of this. I'm going to retire in July. Because he retired in July, under the new formula that he had only been a member of for 7 days, his pension increased by $1,800 a month. And he paid nothing for it. Who pays for it? The taxpayers. And that's what we're struggling with. So we see our CalPERS pension amount that we have to expend go up from about 1.5 to 2 million each year. There's going to be a plateau, so what we're trying to do is look long term and adjust everything so we can make sure we get over that hump. Because there were some changes put into the pension system. A new tier of retirement called PEPRA, it's the Public Employees Pension Reform Act. Didn't go as far as it should have, but it is helping. But all those new employees that were hired after 2012 have a different system. And so we're somewhat waiting for them, somewhat trying to pay down if we can, that unfunded actuarial. And a lot is you're just hoping that PERS has a great return on their investments. They're a $355 billion investment portfolio, and you hope they make some right investments. Again, I could talk forever, I don't want to do that, but
Ken,
Question. What, the two factors that might influence that unfunded liability. One is the expected rate of return, which Cal State projects, I think, in a very unreasonable 7% plus.
Right.
Which probably, unless they're geniuses, which could happen, but it won't count on, it's not gonna happen. I think that's one problem. More realistic would be more like 4%. The second thing is the current pension obligations are based on the present value of future obligations. And that's affected by the interest rate. So the interest rate is now low, which makes those future benefits higher. The rates go up, the long-term rates, then that should bring that down. What's your comment on the pros and the relative balance between those two?
You're absolutely correct. And there's so many other factors going into it. Every once in a while, the cities, and we will also hire an actuarial to give us an update on that whole feature. The other thing that CalPERS does is they base it on your overall salary figures. And they used to do that and then do a percentage of it. And then they were having cash problems. CalPERS for probably 18 months was expending more money out than they were receiving in. So they had to sell off a lot of their assets. So that's why they also had some minor returns. Again, I could talk all night on this, but even at they expect, 7.5, now it's ratcheting down to about a 7%, but even their internal staff say they believe for the next 10 years they're only going to be getting a 6.2 return on their investments. And you really need above a 12% to compensate for a lot of the losses. The other thing a city does not have control of is when you are a retiree, the COLA, the cost of living increase that they give to a retiree, typically is 2%. So we could not give our employees any raises or any other benefit, and we're still going to see that PERS costs go up each year because of the COLAs given to the retirees. And the retirees, there's about 1,300 retirees in the city of Fullerton system, and as I said, there's about 720 full-time active, so almost a 2 to 1. So it's something that very cognizant of. One of the things I did coming in is my immediate offer to the city council on my pension was that I was going to pick up more. So generally, if you're a public safety member, you pay about 9%. In a social security situation, you're paying 6 3/4. Your employer's paying 6 3/4. Public safety, and again, no fault to them. They're paying 9%, and the city is paying about 55% of your salary for that pension obligation. Huge disparity. So miscellaneous employees, those non-safety, pay 7%. What I did is I said, okay, I'll pay that 7%, and then I'll pay, we had to do only 5.696 on top of that. So I pay about 13% of my salary towards my pension, and the city right now is picking up, I think, about 16.5%. So future negotiations for me probably will be to pick up another percent, but probably not get paid anymore. But that's just, I believe you have to lead by example, and we have to get all of our employees, public safety and miscellaneous, to start picking up more of their own pension, because that's going to help us. It's not going to solve the problem, but it's going to help us. So.
Tell me if I'm wrong, Kim, because this is what I always thought working for the cities for 33 years. Police and fire take the biggest portion of, the budget for every city, it seems like. And council approves in negotiations what they want, usually 3 at 50. And I used to work for police for 8 years here at Fullerton. Love the guys, but those guys would retire at 50 because they could, and then they would start a whole other career someplace else. And I want to know because your regular employee, street sweeper, tree trimmer, whatever, that's not where the city gets hurt. Those pensions, you know, to be honest. They get 2.0, nothing. I think that's the lowest in the county, right? 2.0?
About 255 if you're a classic member, yes. So,
Yeah. So that,
That's
you
what I'm
know,
under too, yes.
that's, you know, that's nothing compared to, safety, you know, police and fire. So they take the biggest chunk of the pie, but the city, over all of these years, and not just Fullerton, has allowed it. They approve every negotiation for police and fire, all of these for the past 33 years that I know of, probably longer now. We've gotten ourselves in that mess, I feel. Because I feel that should have been changed a long time ago. If those guys wanna quit or try to find something someplace else, then at some point, cities, because no cities have as much money as they used to, at some point, cities have to decide that they gotta take the big step. And, you know, not bow down to everything police and fire want. Are we doing anything like that, or?
Nothing you have said is wrong. Everything is true. But yes, steps are taken. You know, so the police union here stepped up in this budget situation. They were the only unit to approach city management right as I was hired to say, hey, we'll forego our raise that we're due based on our 4-year contract in order to talk with you guys and see about what we can do. And so we spent about 6 months, a bit longer, getting a deal that they were due, I think another 4.5%. And we pushed that out over 4 years because what I was looking at in the budget negotiations, in the budget and in employment negotiations was either getting true reductions through getting a unit like the firefighters picked up for each of the next 3 years, picking up another percentage of their own CalPERS. Or we had $2 million in health concessions. So I was looking for either true concessions or time and deferring of things that were already granted to an employee unit. So the associations here, I have to give a lot of credit to. They did step up and give us the concessions we needed. And going forward, they understand, I'm very communicative with them, they understand that there's probably not going to be anything going forward the next time, but we'll look and see what the situation is. Fullerton employees generally are paid less than the other employees. For a while, we were losing police officers to Anaheim, Santa Ana, and Irvine because we're also a second-tier city. If you are a classic employee at another police agency, and you go from that agency to Anaheim, you're still at your 3 at 50. If you go from that agency to us, you're now 3 at 55. You have to work that extra 5 years, that's a reduction. Captain Dunn, who's from Anaheim, did that. He made the choice, he wanted to come to Fullerton. I applaud him for doing that and basically adding 5 years onto his career that he needed to do. So, but again, this is something.
It was the right thing to do.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that was the right
And
thing to do.
and paying more towards. We all need to do that. What I stress to our employees is, I'm not just thinking about next year. I'm actually thinking about 10 years after you retire, because here's a scenario. Now it's not going to say it's going to happen, but it's a fear factor for me even because I have about 5 years at the city of Placentia. They have major fiscal problems. If they go out as a city and if for whatever reason they stop paying PERS or do something, PERS, what they do nowadays is say, okay, you're not paying us, then there's no money coming into the system to fill this. We're going to put you into a new category. And if your unfunded liability is at 68%, then guess what everybody's going to get? 68% of what they wanted to get or what they expected to get when they were going through the system. So what I tell all my associations is I want to make sure that I'm putting in a fiscally sustainable structure that ensures you don't have to worry about this when you're 82 or 85 or 71 or whenever, that it'll be here. And it's going to take some sacrifice now, but we need to do it. So, and again, that's a whole other subject we can go into. I want to hit a couple things. So, Some of the challenges: pensions, infrastructure. We'll talk about that a little bit. Potential recession, sales tax changes or imbalances that we've talked about a little bit. State regulations, mandates. The state of California loves to force the cities to do things that the state doesn't want to do. They put mandates on us for stormwater issues, sewer issues, housing issues, and a lot of things that makes it hard to retain our local control and to do things that we know that we need to do to keep it together down at the local level. Speaking of infrastructure, streets, we maintain over 300 miles of streets. Who here thinks our streets are nice? Put your hand down, because you're just asking a question.
I want to ask a question. No, it has something to do with the streets.
Yes.
Okay, now just tell me if there's something wrong with this picture. I moved here 6 years ago, but I read that little paper, that's how I found out about this meeting.
Okay.
The little free paper that they give at Ralph's Market.
Yeah, observer.
So, this is what, it was in one of the papers anyway, in Fullerton, this was probably about a year and a half ago. They were gonna spend $1 million on a bike lane. When the streets are so terrible. I live on Victoria Drive, so everybody cuts through Dorothy Lane, State College, all the way through Victoria. Everybody uses it. It is horrible. And State College down there too, that was 10 years ago, it's still the same. I used to go through there going to Tustin.
Yeah.
But is there something wrong with that picture? Did you spend $1 million on a bicycle lane and not $1 million on the streets?
Now, let me explain it, but no, because that $1 million is grant funds from other agencies that we would not have received. And with that $1 million and putting in the bike lane, we actually get to improve the street. So we have each year, getting old, your eyesight goes also. So for next year, we're going to be expending about $7.7 million on street repairs. Normally, that level is about 4.5 to 5 million, a little short of 5 million each year. That's not enough. Online, we have a pavement management program, the PMP. We have that looks at the pavement condition index, which is a scale of 0 to 100, 100 being best, 10 and you should be yelling at the city, 0 and you're driving on dirt again. It's funny because if you go into the city manager's office, there's some old postcards that were blown up, and one of them is about all the virtues of Fullerton and moving here back in the 1940s or 30s, and one of the lines is, and none of our streets are dirt. I think some of our streets are dirt and rocks. But so very serious issue, because honestly, the value of the streets, and people don't think about streets, you don't think about the sewers, you don't think about, and we have 320 miles of sewer pipes, you don't think about the storm drains a lot. The streets as an asset are about $450 million to the city. That is our largest physical asset. So we need to take better care of them. And so $5 million a year won't cut it. I'm not gonna advocate for anything like that. How we get funding right now is we get about $3.3 million in normal gas tax. We get $2.2 million in what's called Measure M2 turnback funds from the half-cent sales tax the county passed. Right now, we're getting SB1 funds, which is an addition to the gas tax. If that continues, there is a referendum in November. If it continues, if it passes at that point, then we'll get about $2.5 million a year. If it's repealed and it goes away, then we have a $2.5 million hole. We sold one property, and the Meridian property, so we're using the proceeds from that, a little over $2.5 million for one-time only funding for the streets. That's about the only general funds we put into our streets. And then what we also try to do, so we look at grants like that, like the bike trail, also with our sewer and our water fund, which again are special funds, restricted funds. If we're going to replace a water main, then we'll try to make sure we match it with one of the worst streets. We don't want to certainly take a nicer street. But we'll use some of those funds because when you dig up a street, you're naturally taking off the top. And it's a eligible expense to use the water funds to both take the pipe out, replace the pipe, fill, compact, put a new street. We'll throw in some additional road funds, but that's how we can stretch out some of those dollars. We have an extraordinary amount of water main bursts here in Fullerton. I think last year we had about,
Particularly earlier this week.
yeah, we had one earlier this week. We have about 110 a year.
Was that the one?
Really?
from Chapman?
Yeah, Chapman and
Chapman
Raymond, yeah.
That's like
Yeah.
9/1.
It had nothing to do with the car rally the night before.
But the kids were doing the donut things the night before, I wasn't sure,
Yeah.
I heard about it.
Well,
and
actually, you know, it's funny. I said it
I
has
said
nothing
they
to
tore
do,
the street.
but I'm gonna try to go to their insurance company and say, yeah, that loosened up the pipe and it burst the pipe. It's not gonna,
It did?
it's not gonna carry it, but, so we try to do things and be creative. Really, you know, there's, other than using general fund, which I wish we had enough of to put into the streets, we can look at assessment districts. Those are difficult because you have to look at a certain area to define the boundary. There has to be a direct benefit. You have to float bonds. You gotta get all the residents around there to accept all that stuff because they'll have to pay assessments. You can do a gas tax bond, which is you look at your gas tax revenue coming in and you bond against it. So you get a lot more up front. But that's a bad idea because as with any bond, you're almost paying twice the amount of the principal with interest. We could always do a special sales tax just for roads. So that's always an option. A half cent would bring in about $10.5 million because our sales tax brings in about $22 million on a given year. And then you could also go to Domino's.com and they have a pizza for potholes.
I was gonna do that.
So I actually already did it for Fullerton, so but please help out more. But I have a feeling that would probably only give us about 50,000, and that is a few potholes. But we do have, so on the potholes and things like that, we do have a street crew that goes out there and repairs as best as possible because sometimes that's an efficient and effective response to a street repair. But oftentimes you can slurry it, which is the cheapest. It's like black paint going over it, but it seals all the cracks. You can do the grind and overlay where you see them just kind of taking down the first top 1.5 to 2 inches, and they put new asphalt over. That's a good topping. If it's worse than that, then you pretty much have to excavate either all the asphalt, sometimes even down to the aggregate and the base layer. That's the most expensive way to do streets. Bring a little, maybe not, but yeah, that's the most expensive per square foot is to replace your street. So, and that's why sometimes if you're on a street that is horrible, it's a 40 on the pavement condition index, and your neighbor has a 65, which has cracks, we're going to spend money on your neighbor's street to crack seal and slurry, because that will give it about 7 more years of life, and because that'll cost us maybe 50 cents a square foot. We're going to let your street continue to degrade, because replacing your street when it's a 40 costs about $10 a square foot. When it's a 30, it costs about $10 a square foot. When it's a 10, it costs about $10 a square foot. So with the limited money we have, we're trying to save as many of the streets to push them out. So, and it is a scientific basis of the pavement management program using the pavement condition index. He's going to yell at me.
No,
Okay.
but how about if it's a highway? Isn't Orange Thorpe a highway? Can't we get the county to help then?
We so we do put in for grants, and
Because Orange Thorpe is bad.
yeah, it's Orange Thorpe there. So you have 2 classifications of streets. You have your residential, your local, and that's also like a collector. So residential streets go onto a larger street. Then you have your arterial, Commonwealth, Harbor, Orange Thorpe. Those are your arterial highways. We have about 67 miles of those. Those are eligible for projects through OCTA, and we do put in grants and we do get matching funds. I'm trying to work with the county because if SB1 sticks around, there's a huge disparity between what the cities get and what the county gets. So, for example, the County of Orange has about, so I said we have 300 lane miles. The county of Orange has about 320 lane miles. We get about 12,000 per lane mile. They get 160,000 per lane mile. So it's a huge difference. And why is that? Because it's based on an old methodology that was set up decades ago called the Highway Users Tax Allocation Formula that favors rural counties. Orange County is probably the most urban county in all of California. So that's where San Bernardino County has thousands of miles of roads maintained. Orange County has 320. So that's some of the factors we're facing and all that stuff. But again, I could probably talk till 2 in the morning on the streets. Sewer system, there was a question about that. We have 320 miles of pipe. We do have a sewer system master plan that will be coming forward. We need to start that within the next year or so. And what that does is it looks at the condition of your sewers. And it tells you, okay, you have a slumping here, you need to reline. We can take an old clay pipe and put in a fiberglass, looks like a fire hose at first, you stretch it along, and then they pump it full of hot steam, and it seals, and it basically creates a new pipe within the pipe. And you send a little robot through, and you cut out for the sewer laterals and all that stuff. It's really neat. But it's also very expensive to maintain sewers, so that's why you have a sewer fee on that. Some of the maintenance issues also, we have what's called a FOG, fat, oil, grease program. So restaurants here have grease interceptors. There's some ugly videos, and I think if you go online and look at some of the older sewers in London and New York, there's grease and fat monsters in their sewers that are 10 feet long blobs of goo. We have miniature ones like that throughout our system. We have hot spots that we have to go in at least every year to clean out, hydrojet and all that stuff. But the fat oil grease program makes sure that our retailers and anybody else is not putting those fats, oils, and greases. Because when you think about it, and then you think about where all our sewage water goes to, which goes down to Fountain Valley, which then gets triple purified, pumped back out to the Anaheim Lakes, and we're drinking it. The less stuff that goes into it, the easier it is to clean. Drives my wife nuts because I don't put any stuff down the garbage disposal. I make sure it all goes in the trash can. And oh, by the way, the state now has the organics recycling mandate, which all restaurants and other businesses will have to take food waste and recycle that separately of their trash. It's going to be a huge cost. The council's probably going to see that in July or August. It is going to be an increase to commercial businesses. We're a little late on implementing it, as are other cities. And one of the reasons is because the infrastructure to recycle the what they call hot load, the organics, isn't built yet. So that's one of the problems. They pass this forward thinking, oh yeah, let's recycle all these organics, and there's nothing to recycle the organics yet in Orange County. So we're getting there, but eventually that's going to hit everybody. Even residential recycling, eventually you'll have a fourth bin or something for organics, but a major cost.
We have a number of new high-rise buildings, apartments, or condos, or whatever, coming up in the city. Does that impact those costs that you?
It will, yeah, and also they have to, so trash, I can talk to you about trash. Because I used to work, when I worked for the state, I also was the liaison to the California Integrated Waste Management Board, did the tour of trash and all that stuff, but there's material reuse facilities, which is clean, where your paper goes here, your trash goes here, your recyclables, whatever. There's dirty MRFs where it's all combined and you have everybody on the line picking and pulling and all that stuff. Trash is another whole conversation, but yeah, they're gonna have to do it too. So, real couple things, community development. So I have a new community development director, Ted White. Recommend if you have not talked to him or as a speaker, he's great. brings a lot of new energy. We're reviewing the development process. One of my basic cores about economic development is that, you know, yeah, I can call somebody on the phone and say, hey, Starbucks, I have a corner, come and get it. And they may come and get it. But also, if you have just an inviting business code, zoning code, if it's clear, if it's concise, if people know what the development standards are, they'll cite in your city also. So we're looking at that development process. What does it take from even a homeowner coming in to remodel their kitchen, add a bedroom, to a business coming in, and how can we improve it so that it expedites it and it's less frustrating. So those are some of the things coming in there. We're focusing on the downtown area right now. Downtown's a hotbed of activity. Going through the interview process, it was all about downtown. So that ranges from employee parking to potential for paid parking for the late night folks who come here, to just the regulation of alcohol at and entertainment at the restaurants. So we're looking at that. We're going to roll out some things real quick on employee parking, because in the downtown area, in the parking district that's still there, that was formed in 1967, if you're a business coming in, you don't have to provide parking because there's ample public parking. But there is an employee parking permit program that at the time was $5 a year to buy a permit for your employee to park in one of the parking stalls that's marked yellow. That price has increased to $6 a year now. That doesn't even really cover the cost of the material for that permit. And that should be used to do the parking lots, maintain security, lighting, other things like that. So we're looking at that. Also, there were 721 spots. Last year, they gave out 1,991 permits. So when you look at the statistics of like the Amaridge lots north and south, during the day, about 85 to 90% of those spots are taken up by employees. Tell me, how does that help our businesses? So we're going to move the employees out, restrict it, and enforce through parking control better, so that patrons can actually park and shop in the downtown area. So that's coming up through our community development department. A couple of developments coming up. If you go up Harbor to Lambert, you'll see the Beckman building being built. We all know that Kimberly Clark is going out there, not going to be going out for about 3 years. It is in the heart of industrial, and Curtis, I'm sorry, but it's not going to be a homeless shelter, and it's not going to be residential. It is an opportunity to have brand new industrial there, almost like the Beckman style, but there's research and development, industrial uses, clean technology. There's the ability to put in gigabit infrastructure, because if you have a gigabit upload to the internet, you can do business anywhere in the world. And so there's an opportunity on that 66 acres to look at that corridor that's right on State College, bring in a little bit more retail, maybe a business class hotel behind that, and then on that other 40 acres or so, that type of R&D, 2 and 3 story, maybe a corporate office, but to re-energize that industrial area, because it is hard enough to do business in California. It's one reason Kimberly Clark is going out. When you think about their global outreach and where they have plants, it is extremely difficult to be a manufacturer in California under all the regulations and the cost of housing. And then when you look at what they could get for their property, 66 acres in California, in Orange County, outweighs 1,000 acres in Arizona or Tennessee. So the math, I think, was easy for them. I don't blame them, and they're working with their employees, but that's 3 years out. So
Is water a problem? We had a water problem too.
they're really good. They're our biggest user. They're about 5% of our water use.
No, that's the reason for moving.
No, that was not a reason.
Cost of water.
No. And interesting fact, and I just toured the facility. As of June 1, they go off the grid. They have a cogeneration plant, and for the entire summer period and a little bit longer, they are completely off the electrical grid, producing their own energy. So that's kind of neat.
What's your source of power?
Little people on bicycles. No, it's,
Yes?
gas, natural gas. Yeah, it's like the peaker plant that's in, Anaheim, so.
There's a large warehouse, I got two questions. There's a large warehouse or building factory, the east side of town that used to manufacture paper. And they were the largest consumer of water in the city. And I'm wondering how that's going to affect this improvement.
From a water standpoint, I don't think it'll affect us at all. Well, it is a user, so they're purchasing, but then, we're also, we pump our own, and we buy. And so if we don't have to buy 5% more, which is twice the cost of pumping our own, and we have to be doing things to, recycle our water and all that stuff, we're starting a user rate study for water, and we have to get out of putting the improvements that are needed, because we have to replace wells. For example, we all know about the North Orange County plume. We own a big parcel of property in Anaheim off of Bahama. So it's in the city of Anaheim, but that's one of our original well sites. But they're shallower wells, they're about 500 to 700 feet down. We're gonna be upgrading all that to go down to 1,000 to 1,500 feet. So that costs money. And so, but you can't have that set as one of the reasons cities and water utilities were getting in trouble is because they had set their improvement costs as part of their rate. And then when use went down, then they had to jack up the rates to do, generate more money for the improvements that they had planned for. Taking an example from Huntington Beach where I was at, they did their water master plan, they did their user rate study, they set the commodity rate, but then they said, hey, $5 a month for all these improvements, here's all the improvements, here's what we're gonna do, here's the transparency, here's the public review, it's gonna go through, like our equivalent of a citizens infrastructure review commission, and do it that way. So you knew what your there's like a capital charge. But that way it protects against the fluctuation of water usage, which then requires an increase in rates when you start conserving more, so.
The other one has to do with homeless, and I understand that Anaheim, Santa Ana, and Orange have gotten together to do something about it, and because other cities like Fullerton haven't, they're going to sue us. And I wonder what we're doing about the homeless situation to offset that.
That is one of the last things we're gonna talk about, and we are part of the group that is doing something. We're not the other group. Yes, all the way in the back, real quick. And somebody correct me on the time, because I'm on my watch.
Has anybody seen, where Walgreens is on corner of Raymond and Chapman? That's the area that I live in. So what I wanna know is, what are they gonna do with that little eyesore thing back there? It was a shoe repair, it looked like it had been burned and he moved across the street. And then there was like a stereo or something next to it. It's just an eyesore. It's just a little ugly building there. Can't they knock it down with it better? And then also there's a nice empty lot. They could build something on there next to Walgreens.
There's plans in for something there, I don't know which lot. One of the misconceptions is that the city has power to tell people what to do with their property. And we don't. I would love to see.
But they did it Brand. Because they let KFC go out because they wanted to have parking lot.
Well, that costs us. That's eminent domain, and that's kind of pushing somebody out. I would love to see an Apple iStore in one of those spots, but that's not going to happen.
The Polly's Pies, it was supposed to go out, but we talked to the manager, but he had this long lease, so they couldn't push him out. And I was trying to find him another place over here, and I've been trying, but they're redoing the whole thing, AutoZone, over there, and they're gonna put a little market. But I've been trying to get Trader Joe's into Fullerton for a long time. I went on the computer and I sent them a letter over.
There's a funny story in economic development that.
Every time I see a building, and now there's another place. First I wanted that one, then I wanted the one up here where they made urgent care for St. Jude. The newest thing I found is the one on the Big Lots went out. That would be perfect for Trader Joe's.
I think there's a lot of opportunity, but again, a whole nother story. I want to get to a couple more things, because there's a question about West Coyote Hills and where that's going. So it is slow with the recall of Josh Newman. There's a lot of question now about what happened to Senate Bill 714, which was going to reprogram, or was going to program $15 million that was in the prior year state budget. So again, this is a whole nother 24-hour conversation, but no new news right now on West Coyote Hills. The Friends of West Coyote Hills, which the city is in a lawsuit about, there's going to be some hearings on their appeal. This is June, so I believe it's in July. And at that point, they're on appeal, so they lost the first time. If they lose this time, then it's their choice to appeal to the Supreme Court if they want to. I'm always kind of hoping that maybe, the powers that be further up in the state and all that stuff will come up and help everybody out. But as you know, the city council approved is what's called the path forward, which is the vested tentative track map that allows about 760, Jane, you can probably correct me if I'm wrong, 760 units, primarily in the western portion of the West Coyote Hills, which is another 25 homes or so. Then as you go up Gilbert, you would not see any development whatsoever. And the goal is to conserve the entire area east of Gilbert. To buy, it's private property, to buy all that property would be well over $100 million. To put in all the trail improvements and mitigate would be tens of millions more. That's part of the public benefits that the vested tentative track map sets forward. And again, I could go on further, but there's a lot to that. And there's some information on our website, and I'm sure that probably in August, it'll be back on the council for some reason, just because the legislative session is ending up, and there's a lot of gut and amended bills, and that's the process where you can take one bill, wipe out all the language, put something into it real quick, and get it on its way. So whether
Stick
that,
it in there so before anybody gets a chance to read it.
yeah, that's always
They're
a
doing that in
problem.
the House
Yeah.
Representatives of the U.S. right now about immigration. Nobody's read the bill.
Yeah, that's the problem. In California, it's a little bit better. I think we get 72 hours, but, and the last thing is homeless. So, homeless is
One
a,
last question.
yes.
In Coyote Hills, the 760 homes, that deal, that package deal with Chevron, does that cover the cost of making the, excuse me, making the improvements to the east side, east of Gilbert?
Yes.
And provide for maintenance and sustaining the area
Yeah.
for the next X number of years?
So as a part of the development deal, what people saying is the development is all tied in to the public benefits, which is the mitigation, creation of trails, an interpretive center, an endowment for maintenance into the future. And it's from descriptions I've seen and everything, it's it's not going to be a park where you have soccer fields and all that stuff. It's an outdoor wilderness area with trails and view vistas and all that. So, but the development does provide for that. That was part of the deal. So they have to do that. On homeless, real quick, big issue. We are working with what's called the North Orange County Service Planning Area. That includes Anaheim, it includes Orange, Buena Park. We are part of the, I'd have to say, the good group that the judge likes right now, because we're actually identifying the potential for some emergency shelter beds, but also for supportive housing. What supportive housing is essentially an apartment community. It's an apartment complex that has supportive services. And technically, if you are on the street for whatever reason, and I hate the term homelessness, because it's one term that fits 1,000 different issues and causes. But if you have a house or an apartment, you're not homeless anymore. So supportive housing provides that housing for somebody, but most importantly, provides some of those services that they may need on an ongoing basis to be successful, to move up out of that apartment into something else. Or if there's some mental health issues or something else, to keep that on track. I'd like to say that our society unfortunately doesn't deal well with mental health at all. And it is, the common denominator, of school shootings and some homeless issues and everything else, but we need to, and the city's not geared towards dealing with mental health. That's where the state comes in and the county. For a long time, the county has always been the homeless player. They get the funding, we don't. We have some land use control, but we don't get the funding. And now all of a sudden, this federal judge, who I appreciate what he's doing, but everybody's looking at the cities and saying, hey, you gotta solve this. In the last 6 months, I think we've really scrambled and come together and are starting to put together some plans. So, and I do have to appreciate or applaud the faith-based community here in Fullerton also for doing their part in meeting and coming together to see how they could assist to get people off the street and into a better condition versus enabling them to stay in that street level condition. And that's an important factor for anybody. So if you see a homeless person on the street, talk to them about calling 211, which is the county hotline for supportive services and homeless services. Giving them $1 probably doesn't help the situation. Give $10 to Mercy House, Pathways of Hope, Jamboree Housing, or some other nonprofit or the church to use for group feedings and all that stuff. So some questions, and then I think I'm well over my time.
Yeah, we'll take questions.
About the housing though, it's also good to differentiate between the permanent supportive housing versus transitional housing. And I believe the Pathways project is permanent supportive housing, is that correct?
Pathways is permanent supportive. Transitional housing, which is a shorter stay. So
Right, which they have transitional in town, but their new project would be permanent.
Permanent, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So.
My question is overcrowded street parking and some kind of permit. For example, I own a fourplex, and across the alley from me is a 100-unit apartment, and the 100 units must have 5 cars in every apartment, and my street is always lined up with somebody parking. Is there a way that we could consider maybe allocating 2 parking spots for this property and 5 for that property or something like that?
A lot of that problem is because the parking standards of old weren't geared towards the way families are now. Like my daughter just turned 16 and now she's a driver. Yeah, it's scary. And then when we have unaffordable housing, so when you have a lack of affordable housing and you have multiple families in one apartment, then by definition you probably have 4 or 5 cars because, husband's working, wife's working, driving somewhere and all that stuff. It's a huge problem, I'm not gonna lie. And we solve it on a case-by-case basis right now.
I see.
So, but that's also, in kind of talking about some of the things the state does, on some of the new housing, they keep on tweaking down the parking requirement. They say, oh, well, only 1 spot per a unit. We're like, hey, you don't have to face our residents when they're upset that there's parking problems all over the place. So we'd rather have 2, 2.5. But Sacramento passes legislation that penalizes us if we require that.
I see.
So.
Okay.
What about the Hunt Library?
The Hunt Library, I've heard of that. That's in the west of the city. So.
Pacific Drive School.
Yeah, where's our library appointee? It's just here.
Just left.
Okay. I was gonna turn to her. No, so the Hunt Library, the city council has formed an ad hoc committee to kind of look at the uses. It's a great city asset. We can't afford to operate it right now. It used to be the Hunt Branch Library. We can't afford to reopen it. There's infrastructure issues, disability access issues. And so what the council wants to do is work with the community to identify, is there another group out there, cultural arts, a museum, Cal State Fullerton, Chapman University, that could come in and partner with the city to retain it as a city asset, have it open to the public, and accent what it is, which is a beautiful piece of architectural history in the city of Fullerton. So that's gonna be a process that plays out probably over the next 4 to 6 months. But I expect that, we'll probably be taking what the ad hoc committee brings forward, the recommendations, gearing a RFP, request for proposal, or request for qualifications, to then partner with somebody who will come in and operate it, available to the public. Hopefully, it's beautiful grounds. We have to do some things with the dog park that needs some improvement. Also because of the parking. So there's a lot of issues, and that's one of the things I found with looking at some of the outstanding issues in the city. You open it up and you say, oh, okay, yeah, I understand, and you turn the page, it's like, oh, and you turn the next page and there's something else, and then you turn the next page and it's, oh wow. So you have to dig down into history to look at some of the things, because like the parcel, there's two parcels. The one parcel that is the dog park, in order to sell it, we would have to take it to a vote of the people. In order to lease that park, we would have to take it to the vote of the people, because park development funds were used to develop the dog park. So yeah, there's nothing is simple, and that's what I love about the job. So, sorry.
What's the status of College Park, College Town?
Oh, College Town. Not on my radar right now. I'm assuming that will come back in some shape or form, probably not the form that was seen, only because, so I lived in Orange. I was on the Orange Planning Commission around the time when Chapman University was going through growth spurts, and honestly, what helped was to have a document that the city, the school, and the neighborhood agreed upon as far as their development and their progress and their expansion. So Cal State University, Fullerton, I believe there needs to be something that sets that vision. But I was in Placentia when College Town was kind of going forward, and we commented on some traffic stuff and all that, but it just seemed there were a lot of things that led to its death. And sometimes you gotta die and come back to understand what life's all about.
How about, the electric grid, how about we turn it into solar power? Is it possible so that the city can save also this?
Oh yeah, so right now actually on the street, I think it closes next week, we have a RFP for a solar power consultant to help us identify more spots for going green. So we do have solar panels at some of our facilities, but we look to increase our efficiency both through solar power, LED lights, like we just transitioned a bunch of our street lights, and other items like that. So a couple, maybe one or two more questions? Okay.
Yeah, I'm on the Continuum Care Board, which is up under the Board of Supervisors, and I want to know what have we done to get the local churches to apply for funding. We have $24 million available for funding, and I think that ends at the end of probably about 5 more days. Have we done anything to get that information to the churches?
I have sent, somebody named Curtis Gamble sent me some information. I sent it out to our churches and our contacts. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, and I appreciate that information, because again, any money that we can get to cobble together is.
But what would that money be for?
The continuum of care is for mostly emergency shelter beds, operations, even supportive housing, some of the operations there. So we have in the next 4 months about 160 units of affordable housing coming online in 3 different projects. And some of them have Mental Health Services Act funding for those supportive services, and it could go towards that. So the operation, acquisition, rehabilitation of a place. If you buy an older apartment complex and have to rehabilitate it to bring it up to standards, that money can go for that. So one more question. I'm gonna go to Pete because he invited me here, sorry.
Okay, this is outside the box. We have, every school has a field. Over the past maybe 10 years, we found that these fields over the weekend get littered, buried, people, homeless people, whatever, so fences pop up. So we have all these beautiful, lush, mostly lush green areas. Meanwhile, the kids are playing in the street or staying inside their home and playing with their. Is there any way that you could work with the school district to figure out some way of making those facilities available on the weekend for families and providing some sort of supervision, perhaps a volunteer organization help to get kids out there and use, play soccer, baseball, whatever.
Absolutely. So basically the question is, can we have better partnerships with our school districts for fields? I believe that, and you mentioned, sometimes it's fenced off because of homeless issues or trespassing or litter. And so all the things we described about providing more permanent supportive housing will help that. I just met with Hugo Curiel, who is our Parks and Rec Director today, about a Parks Master Plan to look at how do we go and how do we plan for our future need. And I'm a big, you gotta have a facilities master plan, a water master plan, that street plan, because if you don't plan for something a year from now, you're just gonna go, oh, what should I do, and all this stuff. So that will help identify the need of those issues. And if we identify an area where, it's fenced off, and we can work with the school district, and we have a really good relationship right now with the school district, especially the elementary school. Dr. Bob is great. We'll talk to him about certain issues and getting those joint use. We're doing that at Woodcrest Park with improvements. We're working with the school district that we could have left all their fields unimproved, and we worked with them and we said, okay, we'll do all of Woodcrest and then you do this other school. So we go back and forth and we're working on that. So, but thank you all for inviting me here.